For over a century, we've been taught a specific vision of the atom, a tiny solar system of solid electrons. That model is obsolete. This animation shows how modern quantum mechanics actually works. Notice how the probability cloud instantly snaps into a defined dot the moment something interacts with it. That's the observer effect, where reality remains a hazy field of possibilities until an observer measures it. That creates a severe philosophical headache. If physical reality requires an active observer to snap into place, what exactly was observing the universe billions of years ago, long before conscious life ever existed? An independent researcher named Anton Pankratoff recently published a framework called the Observer-Dependent Theory of Everything, or ODTO. It attempts to bypass the paradox entirely by rethinking what an observer actually is. According to this framework, we don't need a conscious human in a lab coat to force reality into existence. The atom is perfectly capable of doing that on its own. It is structurally designed to observe itself. To understand how a particle observes itself, we have to borrow a concept from cognitive science called the strange loop. Coined by scholar Douglas Hofstadter, a strange loop is a closed, self-referential system where moving up or down through its logical levels eventually brings you right back to where you started. Pankratoff maps this exact architecture onto the subatomic world. Take the neutron. It has a neutral charge of 0 and is usually viewed as atomic dead weight. In this framework, the neutron is the active observer, the agent embedded inside the system. Then there's the electron, carrying a -1 charge. Rather than a tiny physical sphere, the electron acts as the operator. It is the functional mechanism that translates hazy quantum potential into a concrete reality. Finally, the proton, with its +1 charge, serves as the observed. It is the actualized physical results of that internal observation process. This diagram outlines the mathematical elegance of the resulting loop. When you combine the neutron's 0, the electron's -1, and the proton's +1, the total charge sums to exactly 0. The charges perfectly cancel out. A stable atom is a completely closed, self-sustaining loop of observation. It contains the observer, the mechanism, and the result, holding itself in reality without any outside help. A neat philosophical loop is interesting on paper, but physics requires hard evidence. We need to see if mapping these components to a strange loop explains how actual matter behaves in a laboratory. Let's test the neutron. Rip it from a stable nucleus and it becomes wildly unstable, vibrating and shattering into smaller pieces within 15 minutes. The loop architecture predicts exactly this behavior. An isolated observer cannot exist by itself. Stripped of its closed system, the neutron is forced into spontaneous action, decaying to generate a proton and an electron just to create a complete loop. The framework also accounts for the electron. In standard quantum mechanics, an electron never has a precise physical coordinate. It exists as a smeared probability cloud around the nucleus. If the electron is a functional process of observation rather than a solid object, it makes perfect sense that you can't pin down its exact location. These strange subatomic quirks map cleanly to the framework. The particle behaviors we usually write off as random quantum weirdness are the strict, necessary mechanisms of a system fighting to maintain its own existence.
There is a massive structural flaw in this idea, and it sits right at the top of the periodic table: hydrogen-1. The most abundant element in the universe is made of 1 proton and 1 electron. It has absolutely 0 neutrons. If the neutron is the required observer, hydrogen shouldn't exist. The loop is missing a third of its architecture. Scale down inside the proton, and we reveal a nested structure of 3 smaller nodes, quarks. The diagram labels this inner triad the D1 level. The proton contains its own microscopic 3-part loop. Hydrogen completes its self-observation internally at this substructural level. The rules of the universe aren't breaking for hydrogen, they are scaling. The architecture of reality relies on infinite fractal recursion, nesting the exact same rules inside themselves forever. This fractal visualization shows the recursion moving in the opposite direction. Smaller quark loops form the nodes of the atomic loops, and those atomic loops form the basis for the chemical bonds that hold entire molecules together. This infinitely repeating structure answers a question first raised in the spring of 1940. Physicists Richard Feynman and John Wheeler realized that every single electron ever measured possessed the exact same mass and the exact same charge. Wheeler suggested a radical answer for why that was. There is only one electron in the entire universe. He proposed that a single entity was zipping forward and backward through the fabric of space and time, intersecting with our reality billions of times. The ODTOE framework adapts Wheeler's idea. Instead of a single physical particle flying through time, it defines all electrons as localized projections of one universal operator, a single mathematical action crossing every level of fractal reality. When that operator pushes potential into actual reality, moving forward, we detect a negatively charged electron. When the operator dips backward, returning that reality to a state of potentiality, we detect a positron, the positively charged antimatter counterpart to the electron. The billions of individual particles we measure aren't unique. They are the illusion of multiplicity, created by a single mathematical mechanism interacting with itself across infinite nested scales. If the operator moves equally forward and backward, we should see equal amounts of matter and antimatter. Instead, we experience baryon asymmetry, a universe packed with matter and almost completely devoid of antimatter. This diagram maps the geometry of the problem. Our strange loop relies on 3 structural components, but the geometry of a curved circle relies on pi, which is an infinite number starting at roughly 3.14. Because the loop of 3 is out of sync with the 3.14 required to close the circle, the path misses a perfect close by a fraction of 0.14, turning the circle into an expanding spiral. As the spiral rotates outward, that microscopic mathematical gap produces a tiny structural remainder. Every time the universe observes itself, it drops a microscopic excess of physical matter into reality, continuously driving the arrow of time forward. Think about the specific atoms constructing your hand right now. You aren't built out of tiny, dead billiard balls. You are constructed from an endless chain of mirrors. The universe doesn't need an outside viewer to exist, because it has learned to infinitely observe itself into reality at every possible scale.